Story 1. The Man in the Rain Who Didn't Blink. This happened to me in 2017, during the kind of storm you don't forget, not because of its violence, but because of what it concealed. I was driving home from my sister's house, a 2-hour stretch through a mostly rural part of New York. The weather had turned late that evening, just as I left, and by the time I merged onto Route 47, it was raining hard enough that my wipers couldn't keep up. My car's wipers swept every 3 seconds. I remember that distinctly because I started noticing the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, a swipe. 1, 2, 3, a swipe. The road would vanish behind water and then reappear in brief, stuttering flashes like I was watching it through a strobe. It was hypnotic, and after a while I noticed something strange in the spaces between. It started with a figure. Far ahead, on the right shoulder of the road, a man standing completely still. I only saw him for a half second at a time. First swipe, there. Second swipe, gone. Third swipe, there again, but in a slightly different posture, like he turned a few degrees toward me. I blinked hard, thinking it might have been a shadow or a reflection. But the next time the wipers cleared the windshield, he was closer. I slowed down instinctively, not because I planned to stop, just because my brain couldn't process the fact that he seemed to be moving forward only in those flickering gaps. He wasn't walking between them. He wasn't running. He wasn't doing anything I could track. Every time the wipers passed, he was closer. I finally passed him. Or I thought I did. I looked in the rearview mirror, but it was too smeared with rain to make anything out. The wipers at the back were weaker, and in that moment the rhythm broke. He vanished entirely from view. The next thing I noticed was how my breathing had changed. I was holding it, like I had passed through something without knowing. The road ahead was empty again. No sign of him. I adjusted my seat, sat up straighter, kept both hands on the wheel, but that rhythm stuck with me. 3 seconds of blindness, then a flicker of vision, and something in those blind seconds that was just off. I turned on the high beams. Nothing. Still, I kept checking the mirror. It was irrational, but I felt like he hadn't stayed behind. Like he was somewhere else now. Maybe beside me or slightly ahead, just outside the arc of the headlights. I wanted to pull over and shake the unease off, but I couldn't make myself stop. Not because I was scared of what was out there, but because I wasn't sure what I'd see when the wipers cleared again. I made it home just after midnight. My driveway runs alongside the house and ends in a narrow gravel lot behind it. As soon as I parked, I turned off the engine but kept the headlights on, a habit I developed living out here. You never really want to step out of the car into full darkness. It was still raining, not hard but steady, the kind that soaks your jacket before you get to the front door. I was reaching for my bag when I saw them. Footprints, wet, sharp and distinct. They started just beyond the reach of the headlights and led directly to my driver's side door. Only on the driver's side, only toward the car. I sat there, unmoving. My porch light was off. The motion sensor hadn't triggered. The prints were too clean, too sharp. That meant they were recent, fresh. I glanced behind me again, out the rear window. Nothing. Still, I didn't get out right away. I turned off the headlights and sat in the dark, just listening. The sound of rain on the roof was louder now. The silence beneath it was worse. When I finally stepped out, I didn't shut the door behind me. I moved fast, not running but purposeful. I kept my keys wedged between my fingers. I reached the front door without incident. The porch was dry, but there were no other footprints. Not up the steps, not toward the street. That didn't make sense. Someone would have had to come up the gravel driveway from the woods, step to the driver's side, and disappear. There were no tracks leading away, no scuff marks, no returns, just a single approach. I checked every lock that night. I even turned the lights off, then back on, hoping I'd imagined the footprints in some weird angle of reflection. But the wet gravel preserved them like photographs. The next morning, they were gone. But for the rest of that week, I parked on the street instead. I started using my brights at every curve. I even changed the wiper setting. Faster now, no gaps. Because whatever that had been, it used the pauses. It took a while for the pattern to make sense. About a month after that drive, I got a small dash cam, not for any specific reason, just one of those safety upgrades people make when they live alone. It started recording automatically whenever I turned the car on. One night, while reviewing the footage for something unrelated, I noticed a flicker in the frame, just as I backed out of my driveway. It wasn't light and it wasn't weather. It was movement. I rewound, slowed it down. Frame by frame, I watched a figure, a human shape, step into view just as my headlights swept the corner of the screen. One frame, just one. The second the light caught him, he stopped. I couldn't make out anything about him. No clothes, no face, just the outline, still as a post. And then, in the next frame, he was gone. No footsteps, no running blur. He didn't move in space, he moved in timing. A few nights later, I left my house at dusk to get groceries. I turned off the porch light as usual, and just before I locked the door, I had a feeling that someone had already walked through that same space, right before I opened it. The car was warm inside. I sat for a second, scrolling through my phone until a notification popped up, the dash cam. It had saved a clip, triggered by motion. I opened it. It was a shot from earlier that day while the car had been parked. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. Nothing moved for 20 seconds. Then, the driver's side mirror shifted, not because of wind, not because of me, because someone was standing just out of frame. I paused the video and zoomed in. There, in the faint reflection on the window, was a face, or half of one. It wasn't distorted, just incomplete, no detail, no emotion, just the suggestion of someone staring in, inches from the glass. But here's the part I can't explain. That clip had been saved at 3:21 p.m. I hadn't left the house all day. I went outside later that night and checked the camera settings. It couldn't be hacked. It wasn't connected to my phone. But the motion triggers had recorded 5 clips like that in the past week. Always while the car was off. Always in the rain. Always only when I wouldn't have seen it, unless I'd been watching the gaps. I started covering the car with a tarp after that. I told myself it was to protect the paint, but the real reason was simpler. I was starting to suspect he never followed me home. He was already there, not breaking in, not waiting, arriving before I did. Story 2. The static came through the showerhead. This happened to me in 2019, in a small rental house just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. I'd just gotten out of a long-term relationship. After 8 years together, we broke it off with the kind of mutual coldness that makes you feel lonelier than if it had ended in a fight. I needed a clean break, so I signed a 6-month lease on a cabin-style place in the woods, fully furnished, cheap because it was technically off-season for the rental market up there. It was isolated but not completely. I had 2 neighbors, one retired couple on the hill above and another tenant who I think worked nights because I never saw them. The first week was uneventful. I worked remotely. I cooked for one. I adjusted to silence. The kind of silence that isn't truly silent. Wind through trees, distant animal calls, the occasional groan of the old wood frame settling. It wasn't spooky, just unfamiliar. The shower was old, but functional. A metal head with mineral buildup, the kind that sprayed unevenly, but it worked. The odd thing was the sound. Even over the water, I could hear something faint, like static, or maybe just pipes groaning. The first time I really noticed it was during a cold front. It was pouring rain, and I stepped into the shower just after a crack of thunder. The water pressure dropped slightly, normal in a storm, but the sound underneath it didn't fade. It got clearer. It was faint, high frequency, a constant buzz layered beneath the sound of the water, and it was moving, not down like the spray, but up. At first I thought it was just the water heater, maybe the pipes rattling. But when I cupped my hand over my ear and leaned back under the stream, the sound rose with me, higher toward my ear, as if it were traveling through the water itself. I turned the shower off and stood there, wet and motionless, listening. Silence. but not the usual kind. There was still a kind of ringing, like the audio signature of an empty channel, and it stayed, even when the water stopped. That night, I left the bathroom light on. The next morning, I ran the shower again, just to test it. No weird sound, no buzzing. I shook it off, but 2 days later, it came back. I hadn't even stepped into the water yet. I was standing there brushing my teeth and I heard it before I'd touched the handle, like a whisper of static in the steam. This time, I recorded it. I used my phone, holding it as close to the shower head as I could without getting it wet. When I played it back, I heard the water clearly, but nothing else. It was clean, but I knew what I'd heard. And the memory of it stayed in my head like a melody you can't place, just enough to itch, not enough to dismiss. Over the next week, I noticed small things. The water sometimes came out warmer than I'd set it. The drain would bubble when the shower was off, but always the same sound, distant static, returned during heavy rain. I told myself it was just the plumbing reacting to pressure changes. But I also noticed something that didn't fit with plumbing. The sound wasn't ambient. It had direction, not spatial, but behavioral. It waited for silence and then filled it. The storm that brought everything into focus came the second weekend in March. It hit around midnight, and by 3 a.m., the power was out. The house was dark, no Wi-Fi, no cell reception, just a weak charge on my phone and the white flash of lightning every few minutes. I lit a candle in the bathroom, the only place without windows. It felt safer there. I sat on the closed toilet seat, listening to the storm. Unsure why I was awake or what I was waiting for, I heard it again, but this time clearer. The static came through the shower head in precise bursts, short mechanical pulses that weren't natural. 4 in quick succession. A pause, 2 more, another pause. It repeated. 4. Silence. 2. Silence. It was too measured to be a fluke. I turned on the voice recorder again and held it steady for over a minute. When I replayed it, the bursts were faint, but there. I didn't sleep that night. I kept playing the clip back over and over, counting the intervals. The next morning, the power was still out. I got in the car and drove to a diner in town that had Wi-Fi. I uploaded the clip to an audio tool and isolated the pulses. Morse code, 4 short bursts. That's H, pause, 2 short bursts. That's I. Or, more unnervingly, hello, depending on how you break it down over repetitions. I didn't know Morse code, but once I saw it typed out, I couldn't unhear it. And from that moment on, every time the static returned, I could feel it in the timing. I even began to notice subtle variations. One night it changed. 3 short bursts, then 1 long. Another time, a cluster of fast, short pulses as if trying to correct itself. The pattern wasn't random. It wasn't speech, but it was trying. And it was always coming from the same place, the shower head. I unscrewed it, checked for devices, nothing. I hired a plumber. He found minor mineral buildup, but no source of interference. He laughed when I asked about electrical noise, said maybe the pipes were picking up a radio signal. I smiled and nodded. But no radio says hello when the water starts. No transmission waits for rain. By the end of the month, the patterns had changed. Not louder, just more deliberate. I began waking up already humming the rhythm, the Morse pattern. I'd walk into the kitchen and catch myself tapping it with my fingers on the counter. I stopped using the shower altogether, switching to sponge baths and public gyms. Still, I'd hear it, faint, just outside the noise of everyday life. I started researching auditory entrainment. There's a theory that sound can entrain brainwaves, syncing your mind to an external frequency. It's used for meditation, for sleep therapy. But what happens when the sound isn't benevolent? What happens when the sound carries intention? I stopped sleeping well. My dreams became noise. Not images, not memory, just audio. A distant hiss behind every surface. I'd wake up thinking someone had whispered my name. One night, I turned on the faucet in the kitchen sink. As the water rushed out, I heard the static again, not just in the pipes, in my head. I turned it off and stood still, holding the edge of the sink. And then I heard it through the window, faint but unmistakable, the sound of my shower running. I moved slowly down the hallway, not turning on any lights. The bathroom door was shut, steam curling out from the frame. I didn't open it. Instead, I called my own phone, a way to confirm I was awake. It rang twice before a voicemail notification appeared. Unknown number, no caller ID. I played it. It was a 24-second message of running water, no voice, no static, just a shower. But it wasn't background noise. I could hear the tile acoustics, the way the spray echoed off a curved tub. It was my bathroom. I went back to the door. The sound had stopped. The floor was dry, the room was cold. I moved out 3 days later. I left the shower curtain pulled back and I kept the water turned off at the main, but I couldn't turn off the rhythm in my head. It still plays sometimes. 4, pause, 2, pause. It doesn't want to speak. It wants to reside. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. She knocked even though the rain was louder. This happened to me in late 2021. During the kind of rain that feels like a ceiling collapsing. I'd just moved to a duplex on the edge of a small town in Oregon. Quiet, pine-heavy. One of those places where people disappear into routine or retreat. I was the second kind. I'd gone through a rough year. Too many things ending all at once. So when a listing popped up for a rental with no neighbors on the attached side, I jumped on it. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, no real yard, but it was mine. The first week was normal. I worked from home, groceries, emails, walks. I liked the silence, especially at night. There was something clean about the sound of rain on the metal roof, like a constant soft wall. That's what made the knock impossible. It came on a Tuesday night during a downpour so dense I could barely hear my own thoughts. I was watching something on my laptop in bed, earbuds in, volume low. And even then, I remember how loud the rain was outside. No thunder, just endless heavy water. Then, a knock, 3 taps, clear, slow, not frantic. I thought I'd imagined it. Rain can sound like all kinds of things, branches, birds, even voices if you're tired enough. But I paused the video, pulled the earbuds out, and waited. Nothing, just rain. So much that it blurred everything into a kind of constant hush. I went back to watching, but 10 minutes later it happened again. 3 knocks, same cadence. And the strange part, they were unmistakable, not muted, not drowned out, sharp, intentional contact, like knuckles on wood, but from inside. I sat up. There was no one in the apartment. The door was locked. I got up and went into the living room, checked the deadbolt, looked through the peephole. Nothing, just water sheeting off the porch light, casting no shadows. I turned the light on and stood there for a while. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd imagined the volume. Maybe the sound carried weird in storms. But the knocks hadn't felt external. They felt placed. Auditory, yes, but also spatial, like they'd landed in the middle of my room. Later, lying awake, I read about something called auditory masking. How rain can drown out sounds, even ones nearby, unless your brain's trained to filter them. Unless they match something it's learned to recognize, like your name being spoken or a knock on a door. The brain listens for what it expects, and sometimes for what it's invited. The next morning, I found the mat. It wasn't there the night before. I was sure of it. It was an old welcome mat that had come with the place, thin, brittle, sun-damaged. I had moved it off the porch and left it leaned against the fence weeks ago. It had mold on one corner, and it left little flecks of rubber on your shoes. That morning, it was folded in half, soaking wet, and tucked beneath my blanket, right where my feet had been. No mess in the apartment, no signs of entry, nothing stolen. Nothing moved except for that. The fabric of the blanket was slightly darker where the mat had pressed against it, water absorbed into cotton. And there was mud, just a little. enough to darken the edge of the sheet and leave a soft, curved print on the mattress. Not a footprint, just pressure. I lifted the mat and set it back outside, this time all the way to the side of the building. Then I checked every door and window. Everything was still locked. I even checked the attic, though it was sealed and clearly undisturbed. I told myself I'd been sleepwalking, maybe brought it in during the storm by instinct, but I didn't believe it. Later that night, I put a chair against the front door, not because I expected someone, but because I wanted to hear if someone tried. It didn't matter. The knock came again after midnight. I was in bed, the room dark, except for a dim light from my laptop screen. Same knock, 3 times, but this time it was closer, not at the front door, not on the walls, right behind my headboard. I didn't move for a long time. When I did, I stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, listening. Nothing, only the rain and the hum of electronics. Still, I felt like the sound had been waiting for the right volume of water, waiting for silence to deepen just enough for it to come through. I started keeping track. It never came during dry nights, always storms, always late, and always 3 knocks, never more, never less. After that, I kept the bedroom door closed. I placed the mat outside again and drew a chalk mark on the underside. Not a symbol, just a way to know if it was the same one. A week passed. Then one morning I woke up and pulled back the covers. There it was again. The same mat, the same fold, same faint imprint on the bed. And underneath, my chalk mark, still intact. This wasn't just someone messing with me. It was someone bringing something back, not stealing, not warning, returning. I finally called the police. I told them someone might have entered my home while I was asleep. I didn't mention the knocks. I didn't mention the mat or the sound coming through walls during storms. I just said I'd found evidence of entry. 2 officers came out. They were polite, professional, but clearly skeptical. They checked locks, window seals, basement access, found nothing. They asked if I had roommates. I said no. They asked if I'd had visitors. I said not since I moved in. They left me with a report number and a suggestion to install a camera, so I did. I ordered a small motion-triggered cam with night vision and put it in the living room, facing the hallway. It worked fine. The feed saved locally. I tested it during the day, during light rain, triggered perfectly. Then came the next storm. I stayed up that night watching the feed in real time. Nothing happened for hours, just me pacing, sitting, dozing on the couch. Then, at 3:04 a.m., the video jumped. A glitch. 2 seconds of static. When the feed returned, the room was the same. Nothing moved, nothing entered, but the mat was gone. I checked the time. I was still asleep on the couch, hadn't moved. I ran to the bedroom and flung the blanket off the bed. There it was. This time folded tighter, damp again, with small bits of gravel pressed into one corner like it had been dragged. I reviewed the footage frame by frame. The mat disappeared during the static glitch. No visible intrusion, no figure, no light shift. The software didn't flag it as motion. It simply stopped recording for 2 seconds, then resumed. The system had been bypassed. That's when I started reading about silent threshold theory. Not a mainstream thing. Fringe stuff, mostly from security forums and deep-dive Reddit threads. The idea is this. During storms, environmental white noise reduces human awareness below a certain level. It becomes easier to enter a space without detection, not physically, but perceptually. Not because you're blind or deaf, because your brain is occupied. It assumes, it edits, and the water, the rain, erases evidence. Footprints vanish, sounds blur, intent can slip through cracks in the senses. I called the police again. They didn't come this time. Said there was no new evidence, that I should contact a locksmith if I was still concerned. That night, the knock returned, but not 3 times, just once, long, slow. And when I sat up and turned toward the sound, I saw something I still can't explain. On the inside of my bedroom window, traced in condensation, were 5 words, Let me in louder next time. I didn't sleep after that. The mat stayed outside, where I eventually burned it in a rusted barrel behind the shed. But some nights, only during storms, I still hear that single knock, not on the door, not on the walls, inside my head.